Now, what I want to suggest to you is this is true across the spectrum. Let's look at our economy. What's wrong with our economy? 2 minutes. When we save, what we invest in is an asset bubble. Because when we save, what we invest in is an asset bubble, that bubble eventually will burst, leaving people with debt and with no genuine creation of wealth. Why do we only invest in asset bubbles? Because there is no trusted medium out there for business investment where we can come together and say, you know, this local project is fantastic. Think, for example, of buy-to-let. The thing that wealth vastly increased, but where did that wealth often go? It went into housing. What did people who are wealthy in our society do? They bought a buy-to-let. What has happened? That has burst and has propelled some property values into negative indices. In the US, the Case-Shiller index on housing is still plummeting. Housing has lost in certain cities 40% of its value, and it's on the way to losing 60% of its value in certain locations. In Detroit, it lost 100% of its value, or even 200%, depending where you are. That's the economic problem. What do we really need to do? We can get people to save and invest differently. If we can create trusted local architecture for investment, where either a local body or a local council says we want to build a bridge, we want to redevelop our high street, we want to create a farmers market, we can create, if it's trusted, a whole new vehicle for investment. And remember, look at eBay. What is eBay? Why is that successful? Because it's a trust network. And it doesn't rely on credit scoring, it relies on online reputation, what people have called reputational capital. And what that means is the rating for a trader on eBay, I mean, whoever would have thought you'd buy FA Cup tickets off a stranger? It's madness. It would never happen. But the reason it does happen is because your reputation is worth more economically than it is to undermine that by ripping one person off. So curiously, we're recreating the conditions for an intimate form of sociality on a global level. We then create a genuinely new paradigm where your global worth is related to your local worth, precisely because people can't credit check you across countries, due diligence costs money, lack of trust massively drives up transaction costs. But if you can create a local trust network, that local trust network can trade across the globe. So what I think could happen is we could create a whole new economic system grown from the bottom up. I've just spent some time in Italy. And in Italy, they don't suffer the crisis of small SME business lending that's going on in our country and in the United States. Why not? Because they have business-to-business lending. How do they have business-to-business lending? Well, they have what I call open guilds. And those are groups of companies who come together, who trust one another, and as part of that group, they have to put money into a pool that they will lend to each other. And when somebody comes and wants to join them, they also have to abide by that. But why can't we use the technology and the internet to create peer-to-peer business lending? The reason that Zopa works is it's between individuals who can credit check one another, but companies are much more difficult. But if you can create local trust networks between companies that is already working in Lombardy, and if you can use the internet to bring people in association who don't naturally associate, then you create a massive new internet infrastructure for business-to-business lending. And given that the vast majority of jobs are actually created by SMEs, given that jobs growth is driven by SMEs, creating new peer-to-peer lending facilities for businesses isn't some minor nostalgic action. It's utterly transformative for our economy. So hopefully you can begin to see what I'm saying. That actually this new power of grouping, this new power that's opened up to us by new technology, if it's allied with a political economy and if it's allied with social needs, creates wins across the platform. Let me, in conclusion, because I probably need to end shortly, let me paint a picture of what it could all be like. If we're able to associate at the bottom of the income scale, then what we can do is own our problems as a form of capital. For instance, if we take an estate look at energy consumption. And if we're all able to assess optimal energy consumption, and if we're all able to say as an estate, we will shift our energy consumption downwards, and if we get a huge payoff reward in terms of that, we can distribute that to people. Or we can use that share to invest in other local enterprises. We can even use that share to build our own infrastructure to progressively take over more of the public and private supply chains and actually get more of the capital from that. So we can do it for energy, we can do it for water, we can do it for any utilities we care to mention, but we can even move the environmental agenda forward more radically. We can talk about feed-in tariffs. We can talk about a massive type of counter closed-loop economic system where we start to even generate our own electricity. Now this, in areas of concentrated poverty, you think, oh, well, it won't really make a difference. But I'll tell you, it'd be enough to pay for 5 security guards for an estate. And those 5 security guards for an estate will massively diminish crime. If it diminishes crime, and if you've got a type of social impact bond with the state that previously has spent, for the sake of argument, 5 or 10 million on your estate for crime, and you start to bring down the crime indices, well, then that is also a form of capital for your community. This sounds visionary, but it's already happening with prisoner reoffending, where if you're under the care of the state, we're approaching 2/3 of people are reconvicted. If it's under the care of a social enterprise or a charity, reconviction rates fall to 15% in the case, for instance, of Blue Sky in London. And the state has now struck a bargain or a contract or a social impact bond with those providers where it will pay those providers to deliver exactly that. But that doesn't have to be just for prisoner reoffending. It can be for health, it can be for obesity, it can be for all the costs of the state. And then if we move from having that power of association to all the other private sector activities that make a huge difference to people, we can start to genuinely create the conditions for a bottom-up prosperity. So to conclude, the task, I think, for digital media or for online leaders is to try to capture locality. To try to capture locality and to align that capturing of locality with a political economy that could actually progressively transform the state, that could actually group people together in all sorts of ways that they can move up their supply chains, both public and private, to genuinely transform the area. Now we know, and we've got lots of details, how in America people have made government much more democratic, uploading photos of broken pavements and so on and so forth. But that's not really that radical, because that's still a dependent type relationship. If we can actually get people to self-organise their communities, they can change their communities out of all recognition. They can purchase through the new community right to buy powers, they can purchase shops, they can purchase buildings, they can own land. And if people of the community become owners instead of dependents, then they can change the behaviour around that land or that asset. And that massively, since land value is essentially social value, that massively can increase the assets they take over. So what I'm saying to you is, this isn't some fake kind of cover for a standard ideology, be it left or right. The big society could, won't necessarily will be, but it really could be that transformative. And crucial to that is the digital possibilities that you guys understand as a collective non-gendered noun can make possible, that can shape. Because if you can link people up with the assets, with the community, with recognition, with status, with the ability to make a difference, if you can show how easy it is, or indeed how difficult it is, then genuinely we can transform our society and our economy. Thank you very much.